So you want your students to get better at something, but drill and kill is clearly not the answer. Been there, done that, didn't like it. So what's a creative teacher to do? Today, I'm going to pull an example of a grammar skill and walk through 5 different ways to practice it without those groans you dread. While the skill I'm zooming in on may not be the exact one that's your focus right now, you can apply these 5 different strategies to pretty much anything. I'm hopeful that by the end of this quick show, your mind will be buzzing with new ideas for tackling the next skill that your students need help with. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So let's start with our focus skill. Let's imagine that you've noticed all your student sentences are looking the same. It feels like you're reading hundreds of quick texts over and over with no complexity to the sentences. There's a subject, then it does something, and that's it. You're reading papers like Gatsby loves Daisy, but Daisy loves money. Gatsby's love for Daisy isn't enough for her, period. You want your students to try writing different forms of sentences, but you'd rather not give a PowerPoint on a sentence type and then have them drill down on writing random examples over and over and over. So let's look at 5 different ways that we could approach this skill that hopefully keep things creative, keep things lively for our students. Number 1, try featuring students' interests. This is so huge across the curriculum. In ELA, you can so often practice skills with almost any subject matter. So consider this. Are your students obsessed with blue Takis, manga, Taylor Swift, sneakers, emojis? You know them. You know what they're interested in. Model the skill that you want in the context of the subject your students are currently into. Maybe you're projecting a photo collage of blue Takis and then getting your students to help you write 3 different types of sentences about those Takis. As you're writing the sentences, discuss the kind of puzzle pieces of each sentence. How are you describing the Takis? What kind of grammar constructions are going to help you highlight the wonder of Takis? As you create this kind of diagram, these examples, you're creating models for future sentences. Then flip the picture to purple Takis and invite students to experiment with those same types of sentences that you've just done, only this time with a partner. Maybe the next day, your sentences focus in on sneakers. You get the idea. As much as you can, instead of writing about sort of random subjects, focus in on students' interests. Okay, number 2, try this. Let your students learn to teach this skill. You know what they say, you can't teach what you don't know. When students teach subject matter, they have to learn it on a different level. To be able to explain it to somebody else, to be able to give examples, to be able to give an effective prompt, you have to really know what you're talking about. So as you work on integrating any skill, you could try putting students in charge of the teaching. So to go with our example of writing more complex sentences, you might invite your students to create an educational social media post about how to write a certain type of sentence. Maybe they're going to create an Instagram carousel about their sentence type, and it's going to have a hook square and a teaching square and an example square, and then a call to action square, which is basically a writing prompt. Maybe they're going to do a funny TikTok video about their type of sentence, and they're going to put on a text overlay that teaches the concept, models it, and invites viewers to try it out. Maybe they're more into Facebook, though I doubt it, and they want to do a visual infographic type of post that explains everything in one big, lovely Facebook graphic. You can let different groups of students work on these different types of social media posts for different types of sentences on Monday, and then throughout the week you can have them presenting back. You're working in a context that they find engaging, social media. You're making them the teachers, which is going to help them learn on a deeper level, and then you're giving them a chance to both teach and be taught, practice these types of sentences throughout the week. Okay, Number 3, try this. Use a real-world context with mentor sentences. We all know the power of seeing language in action, really seeing how authors, writers, businesses are using it online, offline, in books, magazines, newspapers, wherever. Seeing the way language shows up effectively in the real world is a great way to help students understand how it works and why it's important. So one way to do this is to have students go on the hunt for the types of mentor sentences you're looking for in their choice reading books. This way you're kind of connecting the choice reading curriculum with your main kind of grammar and writing and whole class curriculum too. They're getting a chance to show some cool things in the books that they're reading to their peers. So in this case, maybe you want to have them search for really interesting sentences that are more complex than the types of sentences you're seeing. You can either show them a specific type of sentence you want them to search for, or you can just say, I want to see some cool sentences, you guys. Like, go looking in your book and find the 3 most interesting sentences you can find. And then have them take that list and choose the very best and put it up on the board. And then you have this like amazing collage of fantastic complex sentences on your board. And you can kind of start to say, like, let's look for patterns in these sentences. Which of these sentences are similar? How is this group similar? Like, what is the structure here? What's going on? And then you can kind of look at this pattern set throughout the week or throughout your unit, kind of be looking, maybe each day you're going to look at a different type of sentence from your collage wall of amazing sentences. And you're going to have students try out the patterns that you're seeing in their own writing. Okay, next up, try this. Create a game to practice the skill. Now, of course, you can't come up with a game for every single skill you want to practice, but if you can, you'll get more buy-in and the activity becomes extra memorable. So I recently created a sentence structure game. This one is a little more on the complex side. Your game doesn't have to be really complex, but I was trying to think, how can I help students see these different forms of sentences and make it kind of fun and get them to practice it in a way that will feel, a bit light and exciting and even kind of funny. And so my idea was I put students into small groups. I'd put up a prompt on the wall and I would have them all write different types of sentences. And then I would have them vote to award points on which sentence was the funniest, like coolest, most interesting, not just sort of blasé and boring. And so I created these slides that show these kind of funny characters. It's a hamster and a little like ferret, and they're sitting next to some cookies. And all the slides are like different types of sentences about what they might be thinking about the cookies and about each other. And it turns out that they're both gluten-free, so they can't eat the cookies. And it turns out they're on a first date and neither of them like each other. So I tried to make it funny, right? Like all my example sentences to help students understand the type of sentence that I'm showing off with this funny little hamster and weasel are just funny and kind of light. And then they challenge students to try writing the same types of sentences that I'm showing on the slide. And then they take a minute to read theirs out loud to each other, make sure they're following the structure that I asked for, and then they vote on the best, and that person gets a point, and they share it back to the class. And so it's not that different from a traditional grammar lesson where you see an example and you talk about the structure and then you try it out, but it adds this tiny element of gamification. So wherever you can think about doing that, if you can add that little element of fun, it can help students be more engaged in skill practice, which we know is not like automatically super fun and engaging. All right, number 4, last but not least, to try creating a visual connection. And this can take so many forms. Early in my career, I went to an all-day workshop at NCTE called Image Grammar, and I bought and read the Image Grammar book, and I found it pretty interesting. It was an intriguing look at how you can connect writing to visuals. Now, I didn't end up following the Image Grammar curriculum exactly, which is pretty much my MO. I find a strategy I find interesting. I kind of put it in my toolbox in my own way. I don't completely give myself over to the new strategy. I don't believe there's only one strategy for every student, right? I have a feeling you're the same. So, but I like this idea of connecting writing and visuals, and I do think it's very powerful. And so I've experimented in connecting writing and visuals in tons of different ways, and so can you. For example, I've experimented with having students choose a postcard when they're going to be writing something. I have kind of a vast postcard collection. It's one of my things. And so I would have them choose a postcard and look at it, and maybe I would throw out some kind of prompt like set a little story in your postcard, or describe something in your postcard, or imagine you're at this place and write, from the first person perspective or whatever. And so they have an immediate place to start. And then I can ask them to write from the prompt in the postcard, incorporating whatever the skill is that I want them to be trying out. Another way I've had students try out a visual connection is to show them like a 2-minute YouTube video that I think they're going to find super striking or hilarious or whatever. I had this one that was like a woman painting with sand, and every single time I showed it to students, they were just shocked and stunned. And I was too. I mean, it was the most beautiful. She like told a story in the sand, with music in a way that you would just never have expected. And then I would create a prompt around that video. And because they were already in this state of like, oh my gosh, that was amazing, I love that, they're like so much more prepared to do something that is connected to that, which might happen to be a skill practice. Something fun I did with this particular grammar skill recently of trying to change up the structure of your sentences was to create an actual handout that has different shapes against a colorful background. So there's like an image at the top to inspire a story, and then there are different boxes against a colorful background that are all different shapes, like different. There's room for like a long sentence, and then room for a short sentence, and then room for a medium sentence, and then room for a really long sentence. And the idea is that students have to fill those visual boxes with their sentence, and it forces them to think like, how can I describe the next thing happening in my story in 2 words, because that's all the room I have. This sentence just has to be like, he gawked, period. But then this next sentence has room for like a huge block of text. So that needs to be like, she stared in wonder, itching the back of her head, worrying that her mom was about to walk in, staring, you get the idea. Like they have to be creative and think about how they can either fill a tiny box or a medium box or a huge box with the next piece of their story. So there's so many ways you can go with this, with the visual connection, but it's one way to bring interest into the idea of skill practice. Okay, my friend, are you ready to try it? Practicing skills throughout the year can be challenging to plan for, I know, since you don't want to fall into the old drill and kill vibe. But experimenting with these different small tweaks, featuring students' interests, making them the teachers, leaning on mentor texts, adding a game element, or integrating fun visuals can really help elevate skill practice to make it more fun, more memorable, and ultimately more effective. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about how we can take skill practice from kind of a dun dun to more of a dun 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 dun. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.